if you take off some of the appendix type of material. So we're in a good spot. Time to kind of move into the recommendations. So Scott, turn it over to you to continue.
Thank you. The slide 10 that we're showing right now is just an overview entry point for the recommendations. Any changes that people think are needed to this slide? If not, we can go to slide 11. Thank you, Diane. Access, affordability, and education. Just a note, didn't put any of the 3 subgroups in any particular order. If there's a desire to have them be in a different order, those things are easily changed. But for the moment, here's where we're starting. Anybody from the subgroup have any questions about how these were worded or suggestions for making them more clear? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I will just apologize because I know there was some other information that I was going to get to you that might go even into the challenges area, but also some supporting things, and I promise I will get that to you by the middle of next week.
All right, thanks, Mark.
But if there's any clarification you want, a couple of these came out of education, so let me know if you need any clarification, anybody, on any of those.
Teresa?
I was just wondering about Lead for Minnesota. It says provide funds to expand it, and I'm well aware what that program is. What kind of funds are we thinking? I don't know who added this, so I'm just curious.
Anybody from that subgroup want to take that one?
I know that they're involved. Yesterday I spoke with Redwood County, and the gentleman I spoke with was the broadband person for Lead for Minnesota. So I let him know I know Benya and what they're doing. And it's younger people that are up and coming and going back to rural America, to the next generation. When we're all gone, they're going to be taking over. And it's a good program, but I was just curious of the funds, what we were thinking.
Mark?
Yeah, and I wonder if Yvonne maybe hasn't come back or joined us again yet, because I think this one came from her, but as a member of that subgroup, we did actually, we talked about the amount, and we weren't really sure, and that was one of the topics we actually wanted to get feedback from all of you about. Should there be something that we do in terms of a target amount, or do we leave it open-ended? That was one of the things we kind of wanted some feedback on.
I found out from Benya that about $10,000 would be enough with the other matching grants and funds that they have to provide one fellow for one community.
All right. Yeah.
So we were thinking around, at least I was thinking around the range of 100 to 150,000. The rest of the group thought maybe that was too low, but that would put 10 fellows to 15 fellows in communities and townships across the state.
And they are townships. Yeah. It's a good program.
And there's 8 in the state this year, just for reference. Sorry, 6.
I think the larger concept that occurred in is that with so much money flowing into the counties and cities and townships, that there was an increased need for help, just hands on deck to process all of the application work and work with providers and provide trained assistance to folks who have zero education in this area.
And they're bringing in fellows, really smart fellows. I know the guy I spoke to yesterday, I think he went to school at Yale. And here he is in Minnesota now trying to make Redwood County better.
Teddy, if I may, that's Patrick Gary. He's a very impressive guy, for sure.
Yep.
Just 2 comments. One, I appreciated that the task force was able to hear from Benya, and one of the recommendations that she talked about that came up from all of the rural broadband champions who engaged this fall that you guys heard about was a recommendation for technical and staff support assistance to help counties and townships make the best use of the federal funding. So I think that this is well grounded in data and the needs that we heard as a task force. Just one comment I would make, though, that Lead for Minnesota has fellows that address a whole range of issues, and there's a subset of that program that's the broadband fellows.
Yep.
I think there's 6 of them out of 15 or something, and that's connected Minnesota or something. There's a sub piece. So if we care about the broadband piece, we might want to make sure, if we approve this in principle, that we stipulate we're talking about Lead for Minnesota connected program, not all the other Lead for Minnesota work that they do. If I'm making sense.
You are making perfect sense. Yes.
Mark?
Yep, I'm. Thank you, Teddy. I'm in with what Scott said about they're not in any particular order, and maybe there makes a sense. And at risk of alienating some of our subcommittee or whatever members, I will say there's a couple of these obviously that are somewhat on the periphery. And I think if we talked about those 4 bullet points on the last slide of challenges maybe being the first ones, there are probably some of the other recommendations, especially around funding and so on, that probably should go first. So I will just say I recognize that, and we may want to think about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things we can do, and Scott, good comment, Mark, is to make sure that the solutions or the recommendations line up with the way the challenges are laid out, right? So they're kind of for one, and we can line up that way. Paul, did you have a comment? I saw your hand going up and down a couple of times.
No, I agree with Bernadine. If we can highlight the broadband component of this, creating those broadband champions in the rural community, I think that's, again, if you're a legislator or a public policymaker looking at our report, it ties direct. We had, the presentation on the agenda. They're serving rural communities. We could create rural broadband fellows as part of this. I think that's a great win-win for everybody.
Yes.
Yvonne?
Yeah, I'd actually like to add a couple of words to that, phrasing for the recommendation that tie it more directly to the challenge that we heard at the broadband conference, for example. Over and over again, we were hearing this need for, some more bodies to help do this work. So perhaps some phrasing at the beginning of that says, given the express need from townships and communities, providing funds to expand the Lead for Minnesota program that brings, broadband fellows back into the communities. Something along those lines.
Agreed.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Good comments and good additions. But if there's nothing else, we can move on to 12. On this for hands, or you can speak up.
I can speak up on the address level for the maps. The FCC's track data, we all know that's a bit flawed, but what we're doing now is shape files and relying on extensions. And I could bring up something at the end of the call too about a program in Indiana, a connectivity program that I shared with my subcommittee yesterday. That's just, I don't know that providers are going to provide address level. And I know that I have seen some mapping where it was address level, and then it looked like pockets of the city weren't served, but they were golf courses and cemeteries, and so that can be flawed as well. So that's a comment. I know it doesn't say that it'd be a mandate, but a strive to achieve ISP cooperation in producing address. I think we're going to rely on shape files. I know we're going to rely on shape files.
Can you say more about what that distinction is, Teresa?
It'll just circle the whole area of where it is without giving the addresses. It implies just that it's a shape file. I can probably get you an example once I get off this call.
Okay.
And help you with that. And then I was wondering about OBD is encouraged to incorporate the crowdsource maps. I don't know how, I brought that up before. I don't know how they would use that information. And maybe Diane could chime in. Maybe they could. I just don't understand. If we're relying on other mapping, we have a lot of maps with OBD.
Diane, any comments on that one before we move on to the next comment?
Yeah, I mean, we prepare the maps the way we're required to do by statute. We do have access to crowdsourced information on the NBAM, the map that NTIA maintains.
Right.
And it is also something we're looking at including as a layer in future maps.
Okay.
Bernadine?
Thanks, Hey. Just a question, I think it's probably a question to you, Scott. The first bullet, capable of, is italicized and underlined. This is a recommendation that came out of our subgroup, and I just wanted to clarify that the intent was that it be not just capable of delivering, but actually delivering at the time of deployment. And so I wanted to ask Scott, was there some meaning in underlining and italicizing it other than what I said, subgroup, that the point is that the system should deliver 100 by 100 at the time of deployment?
Yeah, I think the distinction there, Bernadine, and it may be a lack of understanding on my part of what was being discussed in the subgroup, is that I recall Dave saying that the capability was in the installation, but the service provider may not offer a 100 by 100 program, or it may not be the only program that a provider offered, or package or subscription. So that there's a little bit of nuance there that probably has to be worked out.
Yeah. Right now, the word is scalable, and I think it should remain scalable. Otherwise, you're going to probably eliminate some providers from having good applications and grant boards, and that would just set us back. I can, from looking at what the most recent awards, it looks like everybody right now has got fantastic speeds and are already surpassing the 2022 and 2026 goals. So I just think keeping it scalable instead of.
I invite others on the subgroup to chime in, but that was exactly the point of this recommendation, that we change from scalable to capable. And that the point here is that we not invest public dollars in networks that deliver less than 100 by 100 going forward.
Paul?
Well, I guess my comment is, isn't that what we've been doing all along? If they, what has been different over the last 7 years of how we've been investing these dollars in these projects, scalable at 100 by 100, but now we're saying capable, which I think is very subjective, and according to whom? Is it to the customer, to the provider, to the state? Where is that angst around the scalable that we would go to this capable now?
Bernadine or Steve?
Scalable implies that there'll have to be additional investments made, right, Paul? That what was done now is not enough, so we have to go back and spend more money to scale it up. And so our subcommittee, we were charged with mapping and speed goals. We did not come back with the recommendation that the state of Minnesota embrace more ambitious goals. The way to get there is to ensure that the public dollars that are spent don't have to be that those communities are left stranded. We've been talking today about that problem. When you get federal investment, but it's not enough, and then you're stranded at something less than what you need. So the point here is exactly to ensure that tax dollars in Minnesota are spent on networks that at the time of deployment, and I understand, Scott, the point, and Dave, maybe we can hear from you about that they don't have to offer the service package, but that those networks can deliver 100 by 100. That's the change. That's the big change that we are proposing from our subgroup about speed.
But the program does say synchronous. I mean, we say synchronous as part of the grant program. Capable is not even like a generally recognized. That's not a network term. It's you could do 100 by 100, But if somebody's sitting there with a modem that's 30 years old, they're not going to get it no matter what you drive to the house. If they've got outdated equipment, so is that supposed to be the provider's fault or the program? I just think we should say what it is. It's 100 by 100 synchronous is what, if we're going to say that. If not, to me, it's like I think we're trying to backdoor the speed goal a different way. If we want to change the speed goal, let's have that debate. Let's not use nuanced words to change the speed goal, that has, that we're not even done finishing the current speed goals.
Dave, I think you had a comment.
I'm listening to a bunch of great points. I think the public dollars getting spent on infrastructure that can't get us to the goal or the end goal is what we're trying to eliminate by using the word capable or scalable. But I understand everyone's view on it. And I realize as soon as we get on that path, we begin eliminating technologies. But the infrastructure piece or the network piece should be capable of delivering at least a symmetrical 100 meg by 100 meg for this level of investment. I don't know how we word that, but I believe across this group, we're going to want to echo something like that.
Steve, Georgie?
Well, I was going to comment on something else, but the current language does say scalable at 100 down, 100 up. So Paul's right about that. I know in our subcommittee, we certainly wanted to emphasize that we wanted to make sure any investments from the Office of Broadband were for future-proof, if we want to use that term, which we hear a lot about, systems that could provide this minimum service. So scalable or capable, it's really semantics, I think. But that was, and again, I don't think that was an underhanded way to modify the speed goals. You don't have a recommendation in here that I've seen to the legislature that says we need to modify the speed goals. So I don't know, in reflection, maybe the existing language does suffice. But
so let me ask for a point of clarification. Is from the subcommittee, is the impression that because the language currently says scalable, that some providers are putting fiber in but not necessarily have enabled their end-to-end equipment to deliver 100 by 100, so that at some point in the future they could add new boxes to the fiber that would then enable it to deliver 100 by 100? Is that what we're responding to?
Well, I think maybe even I can kind of speak on that, at least from like the technician perspective. So the way that it gets set up, at least with our fiber network, is you can go as high as a 940 megabit down and up, so you can make them symmetrical. But the scalable is in terms of what the customer is going to order and ultimately what the price packages are. So you can have it provisioned to 100 megabits. You can have it provisioned to 500. It is scalable, but it's basically just set at different price points. And the network itself would be capable of going all the way up to 940 megabits, but it's just what they're willing to pay based on the package.
And I think that's the question, Nolan, that I'm trying to seek clarification on, is that are there some network projects that have been approved by OBD, installed, and they're not currently configured to deliver the 100 by 100?
I think a lot of that just comes down to the technology, because it's a lot easier to scale it over, say, fiber optic versus, kind of like with the presentation that Dave gave earlier, is that when it comes to traditional copper DSL, the technology, whether it's ADSL, VDSL, if it's vectored, all of that is dictated primarily off the distance the signal has to travel to the end user.
Scott, this is Diane. Yes, I can say that there are projects that we have approved where they do not offer a 100 megabit symmetrical service. Some of these would be, and we haven't done any of these in the last couple of years, but pushing fiber to the node. But with that copper on that last piece, the speeds aren't 100 gigabit symmetrical. But what the state paid for was fiber to the node, and that fiber wouldn't need to be replaced to deliver a 100 meg symmetrical service. We've also had a few projects where it's fiber, but they don't offer a 100 meg symmetrical because that company doesn't have those speed packages across their system, probably, and so that's why they don't offer those speeds in just the project area, though it's capable.
Got it.
Yeah, to me, it's no different than, as we've talked about with speed packages. I mean, we had a project in Minneapolis. Granted, it's urban, but we could offer, one gig synchronous just to, it was kind of a fixed wireless project and fixed 1 gigabit synchronous. We could do that up to, but we didn't. We only sold like 500 because it was part of another package. Where I live here in Bayport, I can, I've got the top package with Comcast, but I could have chosen other tiers. But I know we don't build these networks for the minimum. We build them, for maximum capacity. So, again, it just might be that, they're certainly 100 synchronous capable. And that's what we mentioned that in the grant program. Whether or not it's offered at that, that has to do with, the business case or the demand of the area, the usage demand, customer need, all of those type of things. That's why I just don't know why the language we have there should be adequate. Otherwise, to me, it's like, let's just have the debate. If this task force wants to have the debate on changing the speed goals, let's have that debate.
Bernadine?
It's good conversation. I want to be clear that from my perspective, it's not just a semantic conversation, that really the public policy question here before us as a task force is around our recommendations on the use of public dollars. And the point I think that our subcommittee was trying to bring forward in this recommendation is that in Minnesota, based on all that we've learned and heard as a task force, that we do not want our public dollars spent on networks that do not offer, are capable of offering 100 by 100. The difference in my mind between capable and scalable is that scalable implies, at least to me, that additional investments will be needed. And I appreciate the nuance of getting this right, but the public policy point here is that we should not be spending Minnesota taxpayer dollars on network systems that do not offer 100 by 100, that are not capable, that cannot offer that.
Yeah. So, and just to clarify, I think what Diane said is today when OBD does the funding, up to the node, it is capable of 100 by is capable of symmetrical. It's when the only time it may not be symmetrical is from the node down to the home, and there may be some instances when that occurs. Diane, do I have it right?
Yes, for that piece where we've paid for fiber to the node. The program's also paid for fiber all the way to the home, but that particular provider maybe doesn't. They offer 100 by 20 service and faster, but they don't offer an upload speed at or above 100. It's just not a package they have. I mean, and you can ask some of the providers on the task force for.
But the question is when we fund that program, even down to the home, Diane, I know the package is not offered, but is the network capable of going symmetrical?
It's capable, but it's not. You can't buy it.
Got it. Okay. So does that clarify it? I mean, what's the recommendation here? I just want to make sure that I'm okay with it. Do we need to say, it sounds like all the programs we fund are capable. The package may not just be offered by the provider.
And I think then the recommendation would be altered so that the user could acquire 100 by 100 service from a project that was funded by OBD.
I think that would make sense.
If that's what the...
Well, but does that now bring in some discussion of, okay, if you're going to take, to me, that's telling the provider, if you're going to have to provide a 100 by 100 service to the customer when, maybe the price point doesn't work. To me, it smells a little bit of like backdoor regulation to me.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. That's not the intent to tell providers.
But here's where I get a little nervous, Bernadine, because I look at the PUCO, Department of Commerce presentations from a couple months ago, and we still got all these people complaining about, Frontier, which had nothing to do with broadband. But yet we've got people over there that think we should regulate broadband based on landline service quality. And so, now we're going to get into this. Well, you said you would, I have a real problem with that. We have the language there again. If we want to have the debate on speed, other states have gone 100 by 100. We're just going to blow through the 2 speed goals that we still haven't finished. And we're going to go back to the legislature and say, we decided not to do that, then I'm fine with that. Let's have the debate. But I'm very uncomfortable where we're dictating exactly what the end provider is going to provide to the customer who may not even need 100 synchronous.
I agree, Paul. I agree. And that's not the intent. That's not the intent to dictate. So, Scott, I'd have to walk back your interpretation of that. The intent is to ensure that public dollars are not spent on infrastructure that is not going to meet the needs of communities today and tomorrow. And so, and as a subcommittee, we are not bringing forward a debate. I tried that last time, and this task force did not approve a recommendation to change the speed goals. So the way to get at that is to ensure maximize the value of investments, to ensure that the public dollars are spent on networks that are going to meet future needs. That's what this is about.
Just say that then.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's state it that way.
Sorry, I missed a bit there. I had to jump up on a call. Couldn't be helped.
Okay, Scott, do you need more? Sorry, Paul, I think you.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm done. Thanks.
Steve?
I move on to bullet number 2.
As long as Scott feels comfortable, we can move on to.
Yeah, I think I captured the essence there. I was only trying to be clear about what was the bottom line for that particular bullet.
I agree with you. And I appreciate you pushing, and that's good. Okay, we can move on to 2.
So I think we're tiptoeing around the issue here. The legislature should amend the governing statute. I think as the task force, we need to make a specific recommendation because currently the statute provides for no later than 18 months after the date grant awards are made. They have to complete construction and provide broadband services, how it reads. And to just be ambiguous about this, we know what happens at the legislature. My preference is we need to be more specific. And if it's, modifying it to 24 months or 28 months, maybe Dave can help us with that because the supply chain issue is real. But I have real concerns just leaving it up to the legislature, because they don't know. Dave's not going to get a chance to testify in the House because they're not going to have face-to-face meetings. So I prefer we specifically tell them what we need to modify that change to. Because I have real doubts that they're going to let the Office of Broadband just have discretion. If they tell one, provider, well, you have 24 months, and then the next one comes in and says, well, I need 28. Now we've got gray area. So it should be specific, and I think that's what we need to do. But I think Dave's in a better position to tell us what makes sense. Sorry, Dave.
Want me to comment on that? Teddy?
Yes, Dave, sorry, I was on mute.
No, that's fine. So I think that, that language is at least loose enough to help with the timing. We're like, today for this week, we're ordering cable for 2024 right now. And we're doing double orders, hoping that 50% of it shows up in 2024. So if there's some kind of leniency from the state in timelines with construction of awarded projects, I think, however that's worded, just needs to be a factor.
Okay. Anybody opposed to sort of being more pointed on this recommendation? I don't know, we don't have the wording right, but we can work on the wording. All right, let's do it. Let's work on it. Scott, maybe we can get with Steve and Dave and get something down, and we can, this will be one of the things we'll review next time to make sure we're aligned.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this, on any of the points on this page? All right, move to 13. Steve, is your hand up now? Oh, sorry, thank you. Brian?
Thanks, Teddy. I think Mark alluded to this, but I think this is probably the biggest part of our recommendation is the funding. So I'd like to see this kind of be our lead in kind of going in that, and maybe that was what Mark was alluding to. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Other comments, Bernadine?
So I need to express concern about the third bullet that I think sets up a really dangerous double standard for rural. Talked at the top of the meeting about how over 96% of the households in Minnesota that are underserved are in rural. And this idea of allowing public dollars to be spent on networks that would deliver 25.3 is simply not a good, I really strongly object to that. I just don't think it's good public policy. And I'd like to suggest that we just take out that section and not allow for 25.3 builds with public dollars.
Steve?
Yeah, I concur 100%. I like the first sentence of bullet 3, but everything after that needs to be struck. That's Pat Garofalo right there. And that's not acceptable for people that live up here. When you look at that broadband map that's included in this report, it shows northeastern Minnesota as one of the large white areas that's underserved. And there's no reason we don't deserve better than 25.3. So I don't want to see manipulations to the grant. the fourth bulletin that talks about they don't have to contribute as much and approve these. Nope. Don't agree with that at all.
Okay, so the recommendation is on bullet number 3 to remove the second sentence. That was one, right? Any comments from anybody on that one? I think the only reason that was put in there, and it's my guess, is the fact that I agree, everybody should get at least 100 synchronous requirement, but if we don't, are the hardest areas to reach going to be left out? I think that was the only reason that was put in there, right? They're going to be left out altogether because nobody's willing to put 100 synchronous in those areas. I think that was the intent, but we can come back to that as we see it unfold.
Teddy, one way to address that is, to your point, a different way that doesn't open the door for subsidizing inadequate networks with public dollars would be that final bullet. Now it talks about geographic incentives should be prioritized. I think here's a suggested alternative that would pair with eliminating that second sentence. So if we said, instead of what it reads now, we could say need should be prioritized over geography when allocating broadband grant funds. Unserved areas of the state that are difficult to reach due to density, topography, etc., should receive a higher percentage of funding match to increase build-out options. So that gets at that 50% thing as well. But just a way to say more clearly that need should be prioritized over geography, and recognizing that the difficult to reach areas may need a higher percentage of grant funding to be a viable project.
Yvonne?
I was going to make a similar point to yours, that I'm just a little troubled by the possibility of an all or nothing, for those rural areas, wanting to make sure that we have 100 by 100 or even 100 by 20 when economically or technologically we may not be able to do that in a, cost effective way for a few more years. Are we then saying they get nothing until we get to that technology or that, economic situation? I'm not sure. It makes me a little uncomfortable, I guess.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree with Bernadine's comment. I think we've had this come up in previous discussions, certainly in the unserved subcommittee. There was a comment earlier, we need to make sure, and this, maybe a philosophical thing a couple of years ago, that every part of the state needs to get some part of the broadband grant funding, and I don't think that should be the case. Our number should be that unserved, and if that is there are parts of the state where it's going to cost a little bit more to do that than other parts, but it gets a larger quadrant of unserved. We need to go after that. I thought the discussion, or at least why we raised this, whether, I don't know if we put the speed in there, but our point was, if the grant program needs to be used for some way to get to those that are unserved, where, and this went to Steve's comment from several meetings ago about, Lake Vermilion or Bedrock or something, that we should consider that. Because at the end of the day, if somebody, if they're dying of thirst, they're not going to say, I'm going to wait, I'm going to pass on the tap water, I'll take the Perrier. I think somebody would take something to get on broadband, and then, the problems can solve themselves down the road. But, if we tackle this from going after, those most concentrated unserved areas, I think that would be a good use of, going forward for the program.
Brian?
Yeah, Teddy, I just echo Paul's comments, and I think part of that discussion that Diane even contributed to is that there's some of the states that nobody's even applying for, because even with a 50% match, it isn't feasible and even profitable to go there. So we got to give the Office of Broadband Development the flexibility to award maybe a greater than 50% in order to make sure that somebody will go in and provide service to that area.
Teresa?
I don't know, do we just want to remove with at least 25.3 from the sentence and just say by any technical means available? I mean, more than likely to be a little bit above 25.3. Again, I don't think anybody's going in and doing 25.3, even though wireless is better than that. But like Yvonne said too, and what we're implying, you know, we don't want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, and say you can't have anything because we can't get you the best of the best.
Okay, all good comments. Steve?
Well, I like the concept again of providing more than a 50% match in these difficult areas. And we have to understand this is the path we're headed down as a state. We're going to be getting to those last mile areas. Those are going to be the unserved areas of the state that we have to deal with. So, you know, let's modify that. But again, why do those people have to have less than what current technology can provide them? And if you look at the broadband grant program that was approved by Congress, states cannot set a match of less than 25% except in hard-to-build areas. So the IIPA Act that hopefully we'll get some funding here in the next couple of years recognizes that we are now reaching those difficult, hard-to-find areas. And we're not the only state with significant rural areas, Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, etc. They may not all have the bedrock, but they are very remote. And they're going to be dealing with this also. So, you know, I'm here as an advocate for a geographically challenged remote area that wireless doesn't work necessarily because of our geography and our trees and everything else. But there is no reason that we can't invest the right dollars for the right service for everyone. And
I agree with you, Steve. We can rewrite it. No, we can rewrite it, and I don't think anybody on the call is saying that we shouldn't do that. That everybody shouldn't get that. I think the hesitation, or what we're trying to look at the way we word the language, is so that nobody gets left out because we put a requirement out there, right? Because now the provider in that area is not willing to put 100 synchronous in because it doesn't really work out for them, even with increased funding from the state. And so therefore, those people really get left behind in those areas. How do we make sure that situation doesn't occur? I think that's the key part of it.
Well, I know they can install fiber, they can use every single utility pole that's out there that provides electrical services to remote customers, and we have to understand broadband is not a luxury, it's a utility.
Yep, I agree.
We did it once before in this country, let's do it again. And why can't Minnesota be at the forefront? Let's set the bar high and let's do the right thing with this stuff. So I don't know. That's where I'm.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll some work to do on this page. Through rewrite it. I think everybody's intent is in the right place. We just have to make sure we align on how we recommend it, and that we don't have unintended consequences. Any other comments other than the ones we've had so far on this page? Bernadine?
Thanks everybody for a really good discussion. Steve, I appreciated your comments. I'd just like to echo that I think it is a question of will, political will, and setting what is good enough and what's our vision for Minnesota, and recognizing that there will be greater investments needed. But if we're committed to border and everybody no left behind, that we need, that a good way to accommodate that is to adjust the percentage of public funding for networks rather than accept a lower threshold for rural. My new comment is, and Steve, Georgie, this is your recommendation. So our subcommittee in the last couple of days had an additional one that didn't make it into this report. And Steve, it's the one around, I'll just read it out here. that the state of Minnesota should encourage community colleges and other post-secondary educational institutions to offer curricula needed to certify required network technicians. So that goes to the challenge identified earlier around the workforce challenges. And Scott, I can get that to you. But the point is, and Steve even had an example of a nationally certified technicians program that the Fiber Broadband Association is promulgating nationally. But we'd like to see a recommendation that the state encourages post-secondary to offer certification classes in network technician sectors.
Okay. So Bernadine, if you can get that to Scott, then we'll get that incorporated in the right place in the document.
Yeah, Scott, it's in there already in our doc.
In your notes, right? Subcommittee notes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. If we go to 14, I think from here on out, Scott, the rest of it is, do we need to have discussion? Okay, we can go, you can explain maybe what's in the rest of the document. I don't think there's a lot of discussion here, but.
Yeah, just trying to touch on each of the areas that the Governor's Task Force report is supposed to make comments on. And so I created this content out of feedback that we pulled from different places that came up in various discussions in subgroups or in presentations. And, if anybody has additional contributions they would like to make to these other areas, be very happy to take a look at them, particularly in the resources area that will appear in the appendix, so that if there's key reports that you think could be useful that pertain to any of the challenges or to the recommendations, I'd love to be able to incorporate them.
Okay, and then on slide 19, what was that? Maybe these last two, Scott, what was the intent for these last two slides?
Just to have some numbers that point to how the state has been progressing. A lot of good progress people have already pointed to earlier in this conversation, and we want to make sure that people who are reading this report know that there has been good progress.
Thank you, Scott. Just two quick comments on 19. I think that'll be a chance to show the rural-urban piece of this, which, again, given my role in the test, I'm eager that people understand that. There are obviously metro areas also, but overwhelming majority of un- and underserved households are rural. And then on 20, the next one, I wanted to just ensure that this is going to look to 2026 goals, right? And that we're talking about wireline coverage in these charts.
Got it. And I think that that's a distinction that's been brought up a couple of times, is that the broadband statutes and program, border-to-border program, are specific to wireline or wired. And if anybody wants to showcase any of their efforts in terms of pictures, all of the ones that are currently in the report were provided by Dave and Teresa. So if anybody wants to share any of their work, happy to take some more photos.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. And again, great work and good discussion here. So I think maybe as next steps, what we're going to do is Scott's got a bunch of notes. We're going to update the material. We'll reach back out to some subgroups if additional work is required on formatting the document or some wording aspects of it. That's what I meant. Sorry. And we can get that in, and then we will publish that again. Not publish, but we'll send it out to the task force again for review. And if you could take a look through it and then have your notes ready, and we might. So we do have a meeting on December 20th. Ideally, we would like to get into that meeting and finalize the report, like sort of here's the final state of it. But we'll see how much. We'll dedicate that whole meeting for that discussion. So if you could have, if you could review it once we send it to you, and you have some comments, you can decide whether it's easier to just send the comment in because it's something simple, or if it's something that warrants a discussion, then we can have it on the 20th. We can make some updates there. And then obviously we'll try to see if we can finalize it by then. And so we don't have to do that sprint in the last, 10 days of the year or whatnot to get this published, right? But I think we made great progress. And I think, good discussion. Everybody was super engaged and some really good inputs here. And I think we do have some solid recommendations. Scott, like I told you, thank you again. I mean, this is a much easier digestible format. We're able to go through it and have some robust discussion of some of these topics. So,
well, I'll reach out to you individually if you were tagged in some of the comments. I've put your initials next to some of the things that each of you specifically brought up, so if I need some additional clarification, look for notes from me. But my goal is to have the second round of this that incorporates everything we talked about today, plus the materials that go at the end of the document, out by the end of next week.
Perfect. Yeah, that should be right in the timeline that we're striving for. So any other questions, comments from the task force?
Good job, Scott.
Thank you.
I like how you tied the colors in with the Office of Broadband Development, use their blue and green. And, yeah,
Yep.
It's a sharp looking report.
Yeah. Steve, did you have a comment?
Well, actually, a question, Teddy. I was just curious if it's okay for us to share the letter that we sent to the legislature.
Yeah.
I think there's some really good information in there, and it would be of interest to regions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a public matter now. So. And we're going to reinforce that, right? Like that was why we're going to move that recommendation about the 180 million to the top. So that we need to talk about that over and over again. Okay. Since I see no other comments from the task force, any other comments from anyone other than the task force that's on the video call? All right. I'm not hearing or seeing any hands up. So thank you, everyone. Again, great engagement. And I think we're getting to a really good spot here for 2021. And have a great weekend.